Hello, everyone. Welcome to another segment of Living Room Talks with Sarah Jane. I'm so excited about today's interview, as today I have one of my best friends, Shandell, joining us today. Hey, Shans.
Hello.
And I'm so excited because today we're going to be talking about forgiveness. And so this is such a big topic. And I know it's quite a personal topic for so many people. And today I've asked Shans to come and join me in this interview because I really believe that, Shans, that you have a word for such a time as this. And I believe partly from your experience and partly from the work that God's been getting you to do over the last little while, that you have a lot of insight, specifically around the topic of forgiveness. And so our hope and prayer is that as you listen to this interview, that you'll just be reminded of God's love for you, and you'll be reminded that forgiveness doesn't have to be scary, and why forgiveness is important and God's heart behind forgiveness. And so before we dive into that topic, Shans, I'd love you to tell the audience a little bit about you, who you are, your family, what do you do, anything that you'd like to share.
So yes, I'm Shandell. I am a school teacher for primary kids. I have been working as a teacher for probably 10 years on and off. Have had a child in between then, so I have a 7.5-year-old son.
Yeah.
He looks much older than he is. And yeah, I've been a full-time mum with him. And yeah, I live with my parents, and we love God, both of us, and we've done life with God pretty much since I was a little girl. And so, yeah, I have worked in churches as well, and yeah, I serve a lot at my church, and that's a lot to do with my heart, to work with churches as well as the outer community. But yeah, that's me for now.
And I know as we kind of dive into forgiveness, we'll probably learn a bit more about you as well, Shans. But so forgiveness. So it's a broad topic. It's a personal topic. And I know it can be quite a sensitive topic as well. But when we read the Bible, and specifically in Matthew 18, Peter, one of the apostles, asked Jesus, or disciples, asked Jesus, how many times should one person forgive? And then Jesus goes on to reply, and he says 70 times 7. And to me, that really establishes that forgiveness is not just a once-off thing. Forgiveness is something that we need to do on a regular basis. And so, Shans, if we think about the topic forgiveness, why is it such an important topic to you?
I think forgiveness is important because in relationships, and that is a huge part of living life as a human being, we have relationships all around us. And I think forgiveness plays an important role in allowing freedom around relationships and allowing growth in relationships. Personally, I have some really precious relationships in my world. I have my relationship with God. I have a relationship with my son. And then I think of my family and my friends. And if it was not for forgiveness, we wouldn't be together. We wouldn't have closeness or intimacy or any kind of even friendship, because I make mistakes. I'm so imperfect. And yeah, like I've hurt each person that I've listed there for you, and there's lots more, but definitely in poor choices, I've hurt people along the way. And I think, if I could, I would rewind it. I would go back in time and I would stop myself before making those choices. But unfortunately, I cannot do that. And I have regret sometimes. But what I found was that through my relationship with God, that yes, I can't go back and change time, but because of love, we can grow closer together. And because of that love, forgiveness helps us overcome those hurdles of hurt and mistakes and grief, and that can bring us back together. And it doesn't mean just putting them aside and forgetting about them. We actually work through them and process them, and then we can come back together stronger. So it's like you're building a muscle almost. Yeah, you get stronger from that process.
Yeah. And so as I was thinking about our interview today, I was thinking about forgiveness as a whole, and I kind of felt like there was 3 types of forgiveness. So there was forgiveness from God, which is super important, forgiving one another, which you were just talking about, and forgiving ourselves. Which of the 3, Shans, would you say is the hardest out of all the forgiveness?
So this is funny, because when I was looking at this, I thought, I think it really depends. And that's really what it comes down to. I think for myself, sometimes it can be really hard to forgive myself because I've made a mistake that's really hurt someone I love, or it's even devastated their calling or their passion or their heart cry. And it's like, that they might have a business concept or idea, and I've done something or said something that's really hurt them and put them off going down that path. And so for me, because I adore and love them so much, I find it really hard to forgive myself, and I have to come to terms with that. Or it could be because I've done something really bad, and I have to come to terms with going, okay, I'm not perfect, and forgiving myself. But then on the other hand, there are some things that I'm reminded of that God helps me forgive myself. Also, it can be really hard to forgive others. Situations that present themselves can be really, really tough. And, I am a single mum, so I was married and not married anymore. And I know what it's like to have been abused and broken. And also to be the person who's broken a heart as well. And so receiving and giving both ways, I know what it feels like to be hurt in that way. And the whole thing around that, like working through that forgiveness, was very tough. But I know that on the other side now, years later, and fully forgiven and restored, I know the benefits of forgiving the hurt that had been caused and how much that hurt me. And then also forgiving God can be really tough. And that sounds really almost blasphemous, but, things that I look at in life, like losing a friend, who was young, and thinking why she could have lived. I don't understand. And not that that was God's fault, but for me to come to terms with, negative thoughts that I had about that situation, and thinking you could have done something more. Coming to terms with that and working through that. And that's not necessarily forgiving God, but actually recognizing, things that happen in life, do happen in life. And I have to be able to go, okay, God, I'm disappointed or hurt, but I choose to stay close to you and put those feelings aside. And that is another process of forgiveness. And so, I think it really depends on the circumstance or the relationship, how deep that relationship is.
Shans, you mentioned you were married before. I imagine that there could be some people watching this interview who have either just come out of a broken relationship, whether that's divorce or whatever, or maybe it's been some time since then. How do you navigate forgiveness when it comes to a broken down relationship?
Okay, so this is really it's an interesting pathway, but I think ultimately you have to make the choice in your mind first. So you have to actually have to go, okay, my heart feels this way. It is angry. It is viciously not happy. And it's really hard to even consider forgiving whoever did whatever. but in your mind. And so this is where I came to, it was like I was at my wit's end. I really struggled for me, I was struggling with a broken heart, and more so with depression, the depression side. I wasn't depressed, but I was very, very, very sad and on the point, on that brink. And so what I found was I had to make a choice. It was a choice to stay in this place of negativity and allow it to eat me up and kill me. Or I could step out of it and go, okay, that was really bad, and it was not in any way right. It should never have happened, but it did. And I had to make the choice to step out of it and go, okay, I'm going to move forward. And so when I made that choice in my mind made the choice, but my heart took time to catch on. And so that took time. I took every day, I was telling myself, I choose to forgive. Every day a bad thought came into my mind, I was choosing to say no, stop that bad thought, put that aside. I will not, I'm chosen to move forward. I've chosen to forgive now. I cannot go back and live in that bad thought or that bad experience. I can't relive it over and over in my head. I will never escape it then. And so that was a daily process. And like, I kind of liken it to a marathon, like running a marathon. You can't, eat cake every day and then think you're going to run a marathon and not have weight on. You have to actually train and eat well and sleep well. There's so many aspects to running a marathon. And I liken that to forgiveness. You actually have to put healthy steps in process. So it's choosing right thoughts, choosing every time a bad thought comes in, stopping it and telling it to, no, I'm not going to believe that thought anymore. Or it did happen, but I'm choosing to let that go now. Forgive it, put it aside. I'm moving forward. I also had healthy people, so healthy support people around me who didn't irk me on to like, they weren't going, yeah, let's hate that person too. They weren't doing that, but they were actually saying, okay, that really sucks, and would cry with me. They would hug me. They would take me out places, get me yummy food. But they never once stayed there with me in that bad place. They would tell me, okay, that really sucks, Shans, but now it's time to step out of it. And we are going to pray over it, or let's go do something to like release that frustration in like a physical way or tangible way. But now you've said you're going to forgive, so now you forgive. And they would remind me of my choice. So they weren't like being a lecturer or like a dominative person in my world. They were reminding me of where I wanted to go. And that really helped me. And that came from non-Christian people too. So I have Christian and non-Christian support people who would remind me of how well I'm doing and how far I'm coming and how I need to keep releasing and not staying in that negative place. And in that space was a really healthy place to vent out the frustration. So it was okay to say, you know what, I don't like that person and I don't like what happened or whatever. And it was okay, because I knew that safe person or that support person would cry with me, would feel and empathize with me, but then would help me step out of it. So I just think like those were kind of the main things that helped me process my hurt and frustration and unforgiveness in this very hard situation. And I am simplifying it. Those are really the steps I took. I was constantly reminding myself of my choice, choosing to stop the negative thoughts. And I had my positive people around me, my positive support people who would help me vent, but step out of it.
That's really helpful, Shans. And I know that that'll be really helpful for people who perhaps they're just going through a relationship breakdown. I feel like when you step into marriage, you're not thinking this is not going to last. Like, you are thinking this is forever. And when it breaks down and doesn't work, there are so many emotions you would be feeling. And so, like you said, it takes time. And I think for everyone, that length of time is different. Would you say? Definitely.
I definitely think the time varies per person. I do know that it can happen sooner than you think. So you might think, oh, nah, this is an unforgivable sin or an unforgivable mistake they've made, and I will be angry at them for 10 years. Like, you put a time frame on it. But I honestly think that if you really do process it and face it, and it's hard, it is really hard to face it. But when you do that, and you do that constantly every day, like, again, going back to that marathon, it gets easier each day. You put your foot to this, put your foot to it, put your foot to the training and the disciplines around it. And it will quicken the way that you can release things quickly. And you might find yourself even laughing over things and over good memories. And I did forget one massive thing, which, again, going back to Christianity, was I prayed a lot. I was constantly on my face in front of God and praying and crying and worshiping. Like, I just put music on and just listen to people worshiping God. That was another aspect to releasing a lot of what was on my heart, just crying it out in front of God. I didn't have to say anything. Sometimes only the words that could come out was help me. I had nothing left. And God really met me in those times. And so, but definitely timing is really dependent on the person. But I do believe fully that it doesn't have to take as long as you might set a time frame for. It can happen quicker than you think.
Yeah. And so, Shans, you mentioned you experienced the death of a friend as well. And I know this person was very young, and you talked about forgiving God. Can you just expand on that a little bit? Like, what did that look like for you, that process? And I guess do you think that was a little bit differently to a marriage breaking down, going through the death of a friend?
Yeah, it was definitely very different. I think, so with my marriage breakdown, I could identify things that I was angry about, things that I was hurt about and frustrated about. With the death of my friend, I think for me, there was a few aspects, but I believe God is all powerful, all good. He's the healer. So I really believed he could heal my friend. And I just, still to this day, I still find myself thinking, why didn't you? Or why was her time then? And why isn't she here now? And so out of that thought process came hurt feelings. Like, a person who could help her did not help her. And so for me, that process of going into those feelings was not nice. Still now I am emotional. I'm trying to control my emotions talking to you about the loss of this friend. It's still, for me, and she's been gone for 2 years now. But I think the more that I spend time remembering her and remembering the good times I had with her and the blessing she was to my life, the more I go back to God about it, he reveals more of the hurt that I felt from losing her. And he reminds me of all the good stuff too, but he reminds me of the hurt. So, the good stuff is that she's free from her suffering. She is fully free and in whole form. She no longer has cancer. She no longer has pain in her body. They're no longer operating on parts of her body. And she can talk freely. She's free, free of suffering. But here on earth, she would have been suffering if she was still alive, if she wasn't healed, if she was still with cancer. And I think, I don't have an answer around why she had to go or anything like that, but I do know that God understands beyond my understanding and knew that her time here on earth, though it was short and beautiful, it was impactful. She has left a legacy, and amazingly enough, she's impacted my heart so much. Like, I will never forget this beautiful woman in my world. And so I know that she's impacted many, but the process of forgiving in all of that was God actually highlighting to me the hurt that I had. And that was the unforgiveness I had towards God. I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't really come to terms with it. I kind of just went, well, that's that, and would grieve her every time I thought about her. But God highlighted those thoughts to me. And then out of that, I realized, like, I don't have understanding. I'm a human being who can only understand so far. God has a bigger, broader concept of life and time and world and space and all of that. And so all I can do is trust that God knows what he's doing. And I do. I know he's good. I know he knows what he's doing. And I just had to come to terms with my feelings around that, and it was her time. And I had to release her back to God. She's in a better place. And yes, my emotions are hurt. It's very selfish. I want her back. I want to be able to spend time with her. But that's not for me to decide. And so when God highlighted it to me, I was able to process that and then in time forgive.
What do you think God's perception on forgiveness is? Like, we heard Jesus said, he said 70 times 7. What do you think God's heart is on forgiveness?
Okay, so I look at different examples in the Bible, but honestly, hang on. I just wrote a few points down because I want to get to that. Was that?
Yeah.
I don't know where I wrote it. It's okay. I'll remember.
Just wing it.
I think when I think of God and I think of forgiveness, I think he really understands human form. I think he understands human nature and human relationships. I think like in his form, he knows what it's like to be hurt. So he was the first to be hurt and have something done that was wrong towards him. And we did that first. We made the mistake first. And he guided us. It's just like me telling my son, no, too much sugar, stop it. Just have one bite and that's it. And him eating the whole cake, like it was like we purposely made that mistake and overstepped the boundary we were given. And out of that hurt God. And when I think of that, I think it hurt him. It wasn't about you disobeyed me and yes, it was disobedience, but like it was more about the heart connection that because we had hurt him, it broke that connection. And because of that, God understood what it was like to have unforgiveness or to have something broken between relationships. And he wouldn't stand for it. He loved us too much to allow that brokenness to remain between us. And so that's why when I look at his understanding around forgiveness, I understand he first forgave us. He first made a massive sacrifice. And again, I go back to my son. I think I adore him the most. I'd do anything for him. But would I give him up for someone I didn't necessarily know or like? And I think in my human form, like I'd like to say, yeah, sure, I'm all holy, I can do it. But honestly, I would protect my son. I'd give myself. I'd let my son have life. I would give myself. And I think of how God did that. He did give of himself. He gave his son, his most precious love. And because of that interaction, I think because he knew what it felt like to have hurt, he forgave us. And he knew what it was like to be brought back together with us through the son Jesus. And Jesus made that way for us to have forgiveness. And I think because he knows that, he understands us and he understands our interactions. He understands our ways of connecting with people. And so he encourages us over and over to forgive and not to be limitless in our forgiveness. And that's where I go back to that 77 times 7. Like I just think in one day, could I forgive someone 77 times 7 times? And I think hopefully I don't have to. Hopefully people aren't like that. But even 7 times, to forgive someone 7 times a day, is that a lot? And like Peter was asking that, and I don't think people wrong me 7 times a day. I think I could do that. But to go 77 times 7, you're right. I don't think there's a boundary on forgiveness. And I think if we withhold forgiveness, that also, like, we're thinking we're better than God. Not that we might not even think that deep down. We might just be like, well, I can't. God is like all powerful, all being, like he's amazing. We're human. But that's an excuse. We should be always trying to be more like perfect love. We should always be trying to be like that. And that means we always try to forgive. And again, I don't mean that in a harsh way, even though it feels harsh. Again, I remind myself of this all the time. I think of the people in my world who hurt me all the time and have hurt me in the past. And I know that if I held on to each of those things they did wrong, eventually I would blow up and I would cut them off. I would not have them in my world. There's no way. I couldn't keep someone in my life who kept hurting me. But because of forgiveness, I can work through that with them. I can process it with them. And yes, there has to be change on both ends. But that because of that process, we can come together. There can be reconciled relationship. And I know that God wants that first and foremostly. He wants people to have relationship, not to have broken relationships all around. And he first wanted that with us, So I think looking at his heart, that's where I would always reflect on. I would look back at how he does relationships and life with us, with me, and then try to live according to that standard.
Shans, you mentioned before that when you forgive the people that have hurt you, if you hadn't forgiven them, then you'd cut them out of your lives. I know that there's sometimes situations where someone's done something inexcusable. And so I'm thinking like murder, I'm thinking all those terrible things that happen. How does someone grapple with forgiveness when it's something like so terrible, like murder or anything like that, or some type of betrayal? Because I wonder if some people think forgiveness means I need to still be with that person, or forgiveness means I still need to have that person in my life. How would you reconcile that? How can someone still go on the journey of forgiveness but not necessarily put themselves back into harm's way or to that situation? Like, what would that look like?
Good question. I think so. When I was saying about reconciliation, that ultimately and ideally that is God's heart, but we are imperfect beings. And so you're right. There are people who will constantly make some bad mistakes, or mistakes and bad mistakes. So they might make some really bad ones that, there are consequences to our actions. And sometimes, we have to guard our hearts, and we have to have protection around us. And so I think in terms of forgiving somebody, again, a heart choice, and releasing that. And so that no longer holds power over them or you. And so, you could possibly be in the same room as them. It doesn't mean you have to be best friends with them again, or be married to them again, or anything like that as such. It more is about freeing the pain and hurt that is in between the two parties involved. And of course, the ideal scenario or end goal would be to have reconciliation. But if there is such things like abuse or murder or robbery or theft, or things that are very are punishable by law, they really should be followed through by law, because that is the law. and we can't we can't hide those things away. They do need to be addressed properly. And there are circumstances where you might truly forgive in your heart, but that person is still living according to the way that hurt you or can be detrimental for your health and well-being. And those circumstances do need to be treated with respect and protection. I think there needs to be, like, if there's been any kind of abuse, there should always be supervision of some sort, and healthy supports around that, counseling around that. I think if there's marriage breakdowns, things like that, like so adultery or anything like that, it would have to again be worked through with support networks and trust built. Any kind of abuse, murder, all of that, again, most likely they'll be following the laws of the land. But in terms of reconciliation, really it's the heart connection. It's you forgive them and you release them to, you no longer hold punishment or revenge over them. That comes from obviously the consequences of their actions, not revenge, but consequences. And it doesn't, I don't think you have to stay in relationship with some of those people if they are still following the bad ways they are living. And it's quite tricky because you can only judge according to what they're doing. And if if they have gone to jail, or if they have their consequences are still very much in action, you have to apply wisdom, and you will have to have those supports around you to journey alongside those people with wisdom.
And so with forgiveness, again, like coming back to what we're just talking about, I wonder if sometimes we're afraid to forgive because we think it means the other person gets away with what they've done, or it means that they can continue to hurt us. But what do you think would happen, or what do you think does happen when we actually don't forgive? Like, do you think that it can impact us emotionally, physically? Like, what do you think, I guess, if we don't forgive, what happens?
Well, as a Christian, I know that God clearly outlines that, and he talks about that in the Lord's Prayer, how we forgive as we have been forgiven. So if we hold back forgiveness, then God can't forgive you. And that's, he says that interaction is like, again, like what I was saying, you're kind of putting yourself above how God does things and saying, well, it's too hard. Like they're too whatever. I'm not forgiving. You're stopping yourself from receiving forgiveness also. And for me, that's a huge part in forgiveness, because I do believe in God. I believe God is my number one best friend and love of my heart. So I would never want to be separate from God. And so whenever God highlights something to me like that, where there is unforgiveness, I will face it full on, because I don't want to be far from him. And like, I think the result of unforgiveness, that's one part of it. But then just thinking physically, mentally, socially, you definitely lose that relationship. If you have unforgiveness, the actions that follow will be built off hurt and frustration and or shame or guilt or whatever it is. And out of that comes unhealthy reactions. And which I'll give you this example, and it's a very easy, like a very like little example, but I think of my son, and he's maybe he's playing screens, and we've set it to boundary time, and the buzzer goes off and he's meant to hop off and he doesn't get off, and I say, okay, now it's time to get off, please. And he'll say, nah, just one more minute. And I'm like, okay, 1 minute, and then I'll hop off. Already I know my frustration has risen a little bit, because he won't listen. He hasn't listened for that minute. He's taken advantage and taken that extra minute. And then, so I'm like, what's the point of setting boundaries, really? But then he says again, so then a minute goes by and I say, okay, that's a minute. Now hop off, please. And he'll go, oh, just 2 more minutes, mummy, just 2 more minutes. And I'll be like, no, you asked for a minute. You got your minute. Now hop off. Already my tone of voice has changed. Already I can feel it. I can feel my head pulsing because I'm like, I told you, you know, the timer went off. That was the timer. You've gone a minute over. Now you're trying to push for 2 minutes over.
Yeah.
And if he keeps going and I'm frustrated and I haven't you know, dealt with this issue because he's still on there and I'm still over here and he goes 5 minutes over, I am frustrated and I act off on top of that 1 minute to 2 minutes. I keep building off that frustration. And eventually he cries because I'm yelling at him, not because he has to get off. And it's the way I've treated him. And I think that's what unforgiveness can be like. We can bottle and bottle and bottle, and eventually it'll explode. And if that doesn't destroy the relationship, I think the different things that build up can break the relationship. And so I think unforgiveness can also destroy a relationship completely. And it can be very hard once it's fully broken to come back and mend it. If both parties are not even interested, you know, to even bring that back together. And then there's like things like it can affect your actual health and well-being. So like I said, I got frustrated off 5 minutes of my son not listening to me. But just imagine like something that really you can't forgive and is hurting you, what frustration that might cause to your mind, what stress it might cause, even seeing the stress that's caused. And so that can affect, you know, your your blood pressure, or give you headaches, lack of sleep because you're just stewing over what's going on. You know, your muscles can ache. Like, so my body, with my body, my muscles take the stress. I don't get headaches. My neck and shoulders get tense when I'm stressed out. And so it can reflect in your body. You know, your body can get really sore and tense and knotted up. And then like someone might cross your path that is not that person that's hurt you, but they might reflect some of that behavior, and then your response to them might be dislike, or you know, the unhealthy responses that they come out of the heart because there's unforgiveness there. And that person's done nothing. They've just reflected maybe something that's similar to that person that's hurt us. And so we could break other friendships, other, you know, acquaintances or possible friendships that we could have because they're just similar by a bit to the person that we're holding. So we become like, was it called? We become like a really sensitive cushion, and like one little poke could make us explode at something. And so I think that's what unforgiveness can do. It has so many effects, you know, that can really hurt us as well.
Wow. And so as you're talking, Shans, I'm just like, this is why forgiveness is so powerful. Because when we think about Christ, when he forgives us, when we come to Christ and we ask for forgiveness, or whenever we ask for forgiveness, there's such a freedom in that forgiveness. You know, when Christ forgives us or God forgives us, he doesn't hold on to what we've done, and he doesn't wait to get us back for what we've done. But then I think what we get stuck on is when we don't forgive, then we kind of put a barrier in front of ourselves to stop us from walking in freedom that God has given us. And so I think forgiveness, it doesn't mean that person gets away, because I believe God is a just God. He's a merciful God, but he's a just God. But it really allows us to walk in that freedom that God has given us, and that he sacrificed his son for at the cross. And so it's tough. Forgiveness is tough, but it's so powerful at the same time. And so as we kind of wrap up this interview, I was thinking, and you mentioned it before, one of the toughest things to do is forgive ourselves. And that's been my journey too. You know, like you mess up, you're like, gosh, I've blown it. And then you just condemn yourself and you walk in shame and always putting yourself down. do you have anything to share to maybe someone's experiencing that right now? What would you say to them, Shans?
I think this is where it's like we go back to how Jesus looks at us, or how God looks at us. You know, we remember that when he looks at us, it's like the way I would look at my son. I adore him and love him and cherish him so much that I would not want to let anything come between us. And then I look at how God looks at us, and he does not want anything to come between us. You know, God loves us so much, and that's why he made avenues and ways, and he paid the ultimate price. So even like we say, God is just, he paid that ultimate price for us. You know, like we will face consequences of our actions, but nothing in comparison to what he paid. And when I think of that, and I think of the lengths he went to save us, when I look at myself and I think, you know, this God, the creator of the universe, was willing and able and did provide a way for me to be saved, you know, by grace. I think I can surely look through his eyes and apply that grace to myself. And so again, making that choice when I look in the mirror going, I am not perfect, but I am made perfect through Christ who strengthens me. Reminding myself that it is by his grace that I have been saved. So there's nothing I can do. I could like go back and churn my head and change it, but at the end of the day, I'm going to make some other mistake and I'm going to do something wrong again. And sometimes unwillingly, I might not even realize I'm doing the wrong thing, but knowing that it is by grace that I'm saved, that doesn't give me free choice now to go and do whatever I want to do to wrong him and live my life however I want to. It's more about the fact that because of that grace, I'm saved. I've been set free of the negative sin or bad stuff in my world. And because of that interaction, like I don't have words right now, but just that beautiful love that God has for us to have made that choice for us, that makes me not want to do anything wrong. I don't want to go and make the same mistake again, though I'm human. I might fall and make that mistake again, but I reminded myself of how God looks at me. And that's what I would say. I would say, remember how God looks at you. Remember how God sees you. He sees you as his love, and he adores you and would do anything for you, and has done that. He's done that. And so by his grace, we can be saved. You can be saved. So keep looking through those eyes of the Lord. Don't look at the eyes of your own, like in your own world. Don't look at what people think of you, but look at what God sees in you and face up to what's there, and choose to see what he sees, and come to that place of restoration and forgiveness. Yeah.
Wow. And thank you so much for your time today. It's tough, to talk about these things, but I really believe that what you've shared today is going to speak to a lot of people. And so thank you so much. And to those that have joined us today and those that are listening, if you have questions or for Shans or myself about this topic, please leave a comment in the comment section or send an email or whatever it is. But just know that we'll be praying for you guys, and also know that you have, as Shans was saying, such a loving Father on your side who sees everything you're going through, all the pain, all the hurt. And in his word, he says he never leaves us nor forsakes us. And so our prayer is that today there'll be some type of revelation for you that you can do it, you can forgive, and that when you choose to forgive, there's such freedom in that forgiveness. And so, Shans, thank you again for joining today, and everyone else, until next time, see you soon. Bye.